Hello, this is Bad Vibes. Today's stories are my favorite, all involving home or your neighborhood. Joining me tonight is the Grim Reaper's Nightmare. He will be reading 2 stories. His link will be in the description as well as the pinned comment. Please check out his channel and sub if you enjoy, and sit back and relax. This happened several years ago. I was home alone one evening when I heard a knock at the back door. This confused me, as no one ever uses that back door. My husband and I lived in a fourplex at the time, and all the units had back doors at the top of a narrow staircase. These doors were a little inconvenient to access, as you would have to go all the way around the building and up the narrow stairs, as opposed to the wider main entrance at the front. It didn't make much sense to use the back entrance, and I couldn't think of anyone who would go to that door to visit. As I approached the back door, I saw 2 men in the window standing at the door. A chill went down my spine. I did not feel safe about opening this door, so I called out, "Hello?" One of the men tapped on the window. "Yes, hello. May we come in? We're with Bresnan." At the time, my husband and I had Bresnan for cable, but did not have any issues with it. I replied, "We're not having any issues. Is there a problem with it?" "Ma'am," the man said, "can we come in? We're servicing the area and it's important we look at your cable." I shook my head to myself. "We're not having any issues, so there's no need to stop by." "Ma'am, we're visiting every resident. Let us in so we can do our job." I noticed the man grab the doorknob and try to open the locked door. I slowly grabbed the knife from inside our knife block and held it at my chest. "We're not having any issues," I repeated, trying not to convey the shakiness of my voice. "So you don't need to be here." The 2 figures appeared to shuffle and then straighten. "Ma'am, let us in. We're on a deadline and need to do our job." I glanced at the clock, gauging when my husband would arrive home from work, all while gripping the knife tighter. Ma'am. I saw them try the doorknob again. I closed my eyes and felt overwhelming gratitude, as I always lock my doors. Just then, a thought came to the forefront of my mind. "I'm sorry I can't help you. Could I please get your name and badge numbers? I'll give your supervisor a call and let them know that the cable is fine." I heard another shuffle, and one of the men replied, "No need to, ma'am. We're sorry we wasted your time." With that, both of the men exited the staircase and disappeared into the night. Shaken up, I held that knife tight and tried to get my bearings. I remember making a mental note to call the cable company or the police, but my hands were shaking so badly, I couldn't even hold the phone. With the knife still grasped to my chest and the phone falling out of my other hand, I sank to the floor and cried. When my husband returned home, I told him what had happened. I was still very shaken up and had started crying after he came home. He immediately called the cable company and spoke to a representative. They informed us that no one from the company was out on assignment in our area. The next day, we asked our neighbors if they had a visit from the company. No one had. So to the 2 creepy men that tried to break into my home under the disguise of cable repair, let's not meet. My grandparents live in a house located in a very secluded area, surrounded by woods. The nearest neighbor is about a half-mile away from their house. Whenever my grandfather has work in town for a couple days, he calls me home to take care of my grandmother, who suffers from arthritis. One night, it started raining really heavily, and the power was cut for the entire night. It was really windy, and since this house is pretty old, you can hear a lot of creaking sounds. At around 1 a.m. in the middle of the night, I woke up to a loud knocking sound on the front door. My grandmother was still sleeping, and I didn't want to wake her up. The noise freaked me out because it was impossible for someone to be out there at this time, in the rain, outside our house. But I thought maybe it's my grandfather, who probably had some emergency and had to come home at this time of night. As I walked to the main door to see who it was, the knocking stopped. I saw our dog standing in the corner of the room, looking at the door with his tail between his legs. He looked super scared. I figured something wasn't right, and that if someone was outside my door, it obviously wasn't my grandfather. I went upstairs to see who it was through a window, and just saw a shadow, but I'm not sure if it was actually a person's shadow, or just a hallucination from my sleepy mind. I did not open the door, and went back to bed. The creepiest part was, the next morning, I saw muddy footprints on my porch and a broken door handle. My friends went to Mexico for vacation and asked me to house sit and take care of their dogs while they were gone. They'd pay me $40 a day just to sit around and let their dogs go out when they needed to. I am disabled, so this helps a lot. This is a semi-rural area, and the houses were roughly a quarter-mile apart. Police have to come down from town 15 miles away, and response time can be well over an hour. I always take my pistol with me. It's always quiet when I've stayed there. This time was different. I was in the shower when the dog started barking and growling. They are big, large German shepherds, and one is actually police trained. The owners loan him to the county as a drug dog, and if you tell them to be quiet, they obey. This time they didn't, so I went on high alert. I shut off the water and looked outside the window. I didn't see anything, but when I walked out of the bathroom, I saw a shadow go across the bedroom window. I whispered to the dogs to hush, and they did. That's when I heard a man's voice. I couldn't make out everything he was saying, but I distinctly heard 2 words, "Come around." So I'm sure that there's more than one person. I run into the living room with my pistol and saw the door handle turn. I yelled, "I have a gun and I will fucking use it." I heard feet run away. I was telling Siri to dial 911 and got the county sheriff fast. She said there were 2 cars on another call not too far away, and it would take about 20 minutes for them to get there. That's better than the usual hour, but I was shaken up. I explained that I was on a farm, and I would have to go down the road to unlock the cattle gate to let them in, and to please tell the police officers that I would be carrying a pistol, and to please not shoot me by mistake, because I was not going outside the house without it. The dispatcher said, "Oh no, do not go out there without your gun. I will tell them." The good thing about living in a red state. She asked if I could see the road, and I can. So she said, "Wait in the house until I saw blue lights." I hung up and called my friends in Mexico. Their camera footage could be downloaded via an app, and they said that they would go through it while I waited for the cops. I locked the house and went down to the gate when the police arrived. They searched the whole place, including the barn, but didn't find anything. While they were looking, my friends texted me the camera footage. There was a man on the porch. Unfortunately, cameras were not angled to get a shot of his face, and it was of course dark. I still think that there is more than one creep because of what they said. Come around. The police were very nice and said that they had passed a man on a bike on the way, which was strange for this area, especially at night, and they went to go look for him. But that's all they could do. They took a full report but never caught the creep. My husband came and stayed with me for the rest of the trip. One of our neighbors said that they found a tent and some gear near the woods a few weeks before, so maybe someone was living back there. Maybe a homeless person from town. I have house sat again since, and it was quiet. They're all going away for Christmas, and I will be there again. A lot of people asked me if I would have shot the creep if he had broken in. Yeah, absolutely. I would be sorry for hurting someone, but if it's them or me, yeah. Creepy porch guy, let's not ever meet again. A few years ago, I lived in a large apartment complex. My unit was at the very end of the first floor. A lot of strange people lived there, but seemed pretty harmless. One night, my boyfriend was over, thankfully, and we were watching a movie. I noticed a shadow pass by the window, but then I felt like it didn't completely pass by. At that point, I started feeling like I was being watched, but was too scared to turn and look. I finally look and see a silhouette of a person, and a pair of eyes peeking between the space and the blinds. I told my boyfriend someone was out there and he jumped up. We saw a person's shadow run away. My boyfriend peeks out the window and we assume he had ran around the back of the building. A few minutes later, there was a knock at my door. My boyfriend and I just looked at each other because it's like 1 a.m. I told him not to answer because I didn't want to open the door to anyone. After a minute of the decision, he's adamant of answering it, so I tell him to grab a knife. He opens the door and there is no one out there. He looked over and saw a man nearby a tree doing the "come here" motion with his hand. We called the cops and they said that they would keep an eye out, but we never heard anything more. In that moment, it felt like the beginning of a scary movie. The actual encounter was brief but terrifying. I'm a 30-year-old female. I live with my wife and our sweet orange tabby cat. We own a home in an older neighborhood in a college town. The neighborhood is mostly families and older people. Right around 2 a.m. Monday morning, my wife and I are both woken up by our cat. Immediately after we hear him, we distinctly hear someone rattling our door, making the sound that they would have been holding the door handle while trying to open it. We rush to our living room, my wife wielding her aluminum bat. She smacks our recliner and screams, "I have a fucking bat!" Our cat crouches on the ground and is growling, his hackles raised. I got 911 on the line and we all got into one bedroom with a lock on it while waiting for the police. They came by but didn't see anything. That night my wife didn't get any more sleep. I only got a little myself after our cat curled up next to me. We both called out of our jobs at the university on Monday and wound up getting lock bars for our front and back doors and replaced our back door lock with one that requires a key on both sides. This thankfully went as well as it could have, but was so out of the blue and upsetting. More than anything, this is just a reminder to stay vigilant and invest in what security measures you can. We never imagined someone would try to break in the dead of night when there are 2 cars in the driveway. This is a rather painful story to retell, and it still keeps me up at night. But I'll do my best, as my therapist says writing about it will help me out and help me get through it. It's been 2 years, and it still gets to me. It was just after midnight, and I was home alone. My husband was out of town for work and wouldn't be back for a few days. I was curled up on the couch watching TV when I heard a noise coming from the front door. At first, I thought it was just the wind or a stray cat, but then I heard it again. It sounded like someone was trying to open the front door. My heart started racing and I quickly grabbed the phone to call the police. As I was dialing, I heard a loud crash and the sound of glass shattering. Someone had broken into my home. I quietly made my way to the kitchen and hid and waited for the police to arrive. Moments later, I heard footsteps coming towards me. They were slow and deliberate and sounded like they were getting closer and closer. I knew I had to act fast, but it was panicking in my mind. I grabbed a kitchen knife and prepared to defend myself. Suddenly, the door to the kitchen burst open and a man stepped in. He was rather tall and somewhat muscular. He was wearing a ski mask that was covering most of his face. I could tell that he was older, but not much more than that. I held the knife out, rather uneasy, but he easily overpowered me and knocked me to the ground. I just laid there. He told me not to get up, not to move, and everything would be okay. So I was just laying there, helpless and terrified. The man was rummaging through my belongings, every so often looking back at me. When he did, I closed my eyes. I didn't want to stare at him. Not only not to make him mad, but also I didn't want that image in my head. He took my jewelry, my money, and my phone before finally leaving the house. I was left alone, shaken and traumatized by this experience. I honestly laid there till the police came. Once I heard them, I finally got up. They searched the house and the surroundings and ended up taking a report. As of now, the man has not been caught, and this was 2 years ago. I was left to live in fear, wondering if he would ever come back. Since then, we put up cameras outside the house, and we replaced the door in the back that had a glass window, and it's now a much sturdier door. Anyway, that's my story, and I hope one day I won't think about that every night before I go to bed. I was sitting in my living room one evening, and I noticed movement outside my window. I glanced up and saw a man peering in. His face was pressed against the glass. I jumped up in shock and ran to the window, but he had already disappeared into the darkness. I felt very violated and scared, knowing that someone had been watching me in my own home. I immediately called the police, but there was little that they could do without any identifying information about this peeping Tom. The next night, it happened again. I was in my bedroom getting ready for bed when I heard rustling outside my window. I looked up and saw the same man staring at me with a look of excitement in his face. I screamed and ran to the phone, but by the time the police arrived, he was gone. This went on for weeks, with the man appearing at all hours of the night, watching me from outside my window. No matter if I had the blinds drawn or curtains up, it seemed like he would find the opening and stare in. I know this because my neighbor told me that he saw a man hanging around my house. I felt like a prisoner in my own home, constantly looking over my shoulder and jumping at every noise. I tried to stay strong and vigilant, but eventually, the stress and anxiety became too much. I couldn't sleep, couldn't eat, and felt like I was losing my mind. It was a constant battle to feel safe and secure in my own home. Finally, the police are able to catch the man in the act. It turns out that it was my neighbor who had been stalking me for months. I felt a sense of relief knowing that he was finally caught, but the trauma of the experience stayed with me for years to come. I lost my sense of security and privacy, and it took me a long time to regain those feelings again. This happened years ago when I was in college. We were 4 girls living in a dorm room. So I had this roommate, Anna, that used to stay late at night outside or at her boyfriend's, and she would always forget to lock our dorm room door. One night, around 3 a.m., I woke up from a nightmare. I heard something like a girl screaming, only once. But when I realized the dorm was all quiet, I thought for sure that it was just my imagination. I noticed that Anna had returned. She was in bed and I felt a strange urge to go see if the door was locked. So for the next few minutes I had this internal dialogue. Go check the door. No, because if I stand up I'll lose my sleep. Eventually my laziness won and I fell asleep. When I woke up, my roommates briefed me on what happened that night. The whole dorm was talking about it. Apparently a stranger entered our dorm that night. He was in his late 40s. He heard some girls in the room were not sleeping and were loud, so he banged on their door and said something that I can't quite remember now. After some time, thinking he left, one of the girls went to the bathroom. The bathrooms are located in the hallway. As she was in the bathroom, he tried to break open the door. This was happening on the same floor where we lived, so that's probably why I heard the scream. Luckily, another girl saved her when she called the police and he got scared and ran away. But that's not all. Before he tried to assault that girl, he had been in the study room and vandalized it. He pooped on the floor, ripped the blouse that was on a chair, and did other stuff in there. Made the study room a mess. The study room was right next to my room, and guess what? That night we slept with our door unlocked. Just like you guys always say in here, always trust your gut. I should have trusted mine and checked the door. Thank God he didn't try our door. A few days later, I heard that the police found the guy, and I heard that he was free. After that event, they increased the level of dorm security.
Evening, folks. This has been ongoing for some time now, but tonight was particularly weird. Please excuse any weird formatting. I'm doing this on mobile. Currently under my blankets, kinda freaking out. So, some context. I'm 25, female, and live on the second story of my building across from a big city. We have lots of houseless people in my area, and there's a safe injection site right next to my home. I'll mention right off the bat that I have been houseless within my lifetime from the ages of 8 to 10. And grew up in the care of an addict. I completely empathize with folks who are having a tough go at things. However, I also value my safety and my neighbor's safety for that matter. So I will preemptively apologize if at any point I sound frustrated at this ongoing situation. I'm mad at the situation that has plagued both the life of myself and the houseless man who is tormenting my building. This all started about a year ago when my partner and I were nearly attacked by this houseless man while downstairs in our parking lot. To summarize the situation, we had just gotten home where my partner was going to drop me off. We didn't live together at the time. We kind of do now, but only on the weekends. And as we said our goodbyes, we noticed a man pacing in the visitors' parking lot who was seemingly having a rough time. We kept our distance, car doors locked and windows up, and eventually the man got the hint and left. Just to set the scene a bit here, my parking lot has two sections. One is a public parking guest area, and the second is a locked gate with a smaller locked door for residents to safely park overnight. The gate requires a FOB entry, and the door has a regular building key. Both were made with metal bars. This is important for later. I got out of the car and proceeded to walk towards the door, key in hand. My partner started up the car, which caused the houseless man to rush back into the parking lot and promptly attack the car. He hopped onto the hood, beating on the windows and trying to rip off the mirrors. I watched in horror as this terrifying situation evolved next to me, a mere 14 feet away. I quickly got my key into the lock and opened the door at lightning speed. The sound of my keys caught the attention of the man, and he promptly sprinted towards me. Thankfully, by this point, I had begun closing the door behind me. By the time he got to me, I slammed the door in his face and stepped backwards while he screamed at me. When my partner realized I was safely behind a locked door, he got into gear and drove away. Moments later, he called me and instructed me to get away from the door and safely upstairs. It was a good thing he did. I felt like I was in freeze mode. I couldn't move. My heart was pounding out of my chest as this houseless man screamed disgusting things at me, most of which revolved around essaying me and gesturing crudely at his groin and flicking his tongue. I finally broke my fear freeze, walked away as he chanted, pretty lady, want to taste, huh?" Those words are burned into my memory. I rushed upstairs and quickly closed the blinds of my windows. I heard him still yelling and chanting outside for a good few minutes after. But then I heard something unusual. A lighter clicking. The silence was deafening as the lighter clicked repetitively. Eventually the click stopped and he began laughing. I looked outside, peering through the blinds. I realized he was attempting to set our building's wooden fence on fire. Luckily it had rained, so the fence wasn't catching. I quickly hopped on a call with the emergency services, who sent a police car and fire truck. As soon as the cop car pulled up, the houseless man went ballistic and started screaming bloody murder. They apprehended him quickly and took him away in the ambulance. Months passed with no sign of him, but one day a resident in my building reported being attacked by a man who matched his description. After the incident, we, the residents, repeatedly heard him screaming, crying, moaning, and laughing at least 3 times a week outside our building, generally at night. He also started trashing and damaging people's cars when they parked in the guest parking lot. Thankfully, we installed a new gate last week that closes off the guest parking behind another FOB-activated gate. The thing is, as soon as the gate got installed, the man left us alone. It has been quite a week. It's been nice, but tonight, about an hour ago, I was laying in bed scrolling on TikTok when I heard what sounded like soft sobbing. At first, I thought it was coming from TikTok, but after some scrolling, I realized it was coming from outside. I looked outside, and there he was, sobbing and pacing around the back alley. He suddenly switched gears, though, and started jogging while groaning loudly and continuing to cry while occasionally hitting and attacking the new fence we installed. He has seemingly left now, but I'm terrified at this new habit. I'm really hoping he doesn't start crying outside my building routinely. I feel really bad for the guy, and I also feel bad making this post, but the whole situation is really freaking me out. I don't feel safe. My own home, and I just need to vent. Thanks for reading. If anything else happens, I'll update this post. This story happened to me back when I still lived at my parents' house. I was commuting to college at the time and had 3 siblings that also lived at home. My brother and 2 sisters. For some context, we live on 5 acres in rural Ohio, surrounded on both sides by woods and farm fields. Additionally, during the week, my dad normally left for work at 2 a.m., so I had always felt like it was my job to be the man of the house, because he was gone during the times when you would imagine something sketchy happening. However, on this night, because it was the weekend, my dad was home. I woke up to the sound of my brother's voice trying to get my attention. We had separate rooms upstairs, and coming out of our rooms, you could look down over the banister and see our front door. When I woke up, it took a few moments to get out of the haze and realize what was going on. I looked at the clock, and it was around 2:30 a.m. My brother told me there were 2 men at our front door. Of course, now, this is a real wake-up call. We quietly walked out of the room and peeked over to look at the front door. When we looked, there was no one at the door, but I noticed my parents off to the side, out of view of the glass on the front door. I whispered down to my dad, and he told me that there were 2 guys who had been talking to each other and knocking on the door. Hearing my dad say this freaked me out even more. I went back into my room and grabbed my pistol, quickly shuffling down the stairs after looking to make sure they weren't at the door. If they had been, they would have easily seen me coming down the stairs, as it is in direct view of the door. My brother is right behind me as we headed over to where our parents are, whispering to try to find out what's going on. My parents had woken up to our dog barking and come out to see these 2 men knocking loudly at the door. At this point, we see the men return and they begin knocking again, despite the fact that no one had come to the door and our dog was still actively barking. The fact that they were there at this time in a location where houses are spread out hundreds of yards and still knocking while the dog was barking made this situation even more terrifying. After a couple of minutes, the men walked away and we shuffled across the kitchen into the family room to peek out the windows into our driveway, which is lit up by our outside lights. There was a black Cadillac sitting there, but no one was inside from what we could see. Immediately, the question was, where did the guys go? They weren't in the car and they were no longer at the front door. Unfortunately, we figured out the answer when the handles to our back French doors started jiggling. They were actively trying to enter the back of our house, which enters into the kitchen. At this point, I just remember my mum frantically saying David as pure terror overwhelmed her. At this point, two things happened. Adrenaline filled my body as I prepared my handgun, horrified at the very real possibility that I might have to shoot these men. Secondly, my dad finally grabbed his phone and called the police and calmly told them what was happening. Thankfully, after a minute of jiggling, they stopped at the back door and disappeared again, only to return to their knocking at the front. However, at this point, several minutes had gone by and suddenly we saw the local police fly up in multiple cruisers with their lights on. As they whipped into our driveway and the yard, the two men bolted away, attempting to run the long way around the house across the driveway. One of them disappeared out of view, but the other was intercepted by an officer yelling at him to get on the ground. He didn't, and he was immediately tased and fell to the ground. Some of the officers went around the house after the other guy, and one of them came back to my dad, and as we came out to the front, they ended up finding the other man hiding in my sister's little playhouse in the backyard. It appears both of them were drunk or high, as one of them had cocaine on him. While they were both arrested that night, we never did find out what they were charged with or what happened to them. Needless to say, the whole experience wasn't fun. So, random men at our door in the middle of the night? Let's not meet again.
So let me preface this by saying I grew up in an upper middle class area. Really nice neighborhood with nothing but old people as neighbors. We lived near great schools and there was a relatively low crime rate other than one neighborhood known for meth. When I was 13, we had our first break-in. Nobody was home and I had just gotten off the bus. My mom was waiting for me at the top of the driveway in her grocery-filled car. She was on the phone with my dad. She told me to wait with her since the window was busted out. My dad came home with 3 friends and got baseball bats to search the house. Nothing. The only reason we didn't call the cops is because we have a cat who likes to sit on the windowsill, and we often left the window open for a breeze, leaving just a screen. We assumed that maybe the cat knocked out the screen by accident because someone forgot to close it. But then we later saw a boot print in the dirt going to the window. I noticed our rug is all Scooby-Dooed and rolled up from someone running. We assumed they saw our alarm system, which tracks movement and flashes, and got scared and ran thinking it was a silent alarm. What's odd is, one step after entering the window was the computer, a TV, cash, and a camera. Nothing stolen. The second time getting broken into, I was 14. Same exact thing, window busted. Nothing taken, boot print. This time we knew someone was coming after our house. We started setting our alarm more often. About 6 months later, I'm in the backyard sitting on a swing with my back facing the woods. My mom comes out on the upper deck and calls out to me saying that her and my dad are going to go see a movie and they would be back home in a few hours. I said okay and came back in through the basement door. Stupidly, I forgot to lock it. I stay in the basement in a side room with only one exit point and play Xbox. I put on my headset that covers my ears and enjoy about 20 minutes of Call of Duty before my cat, who's sitting on my lap, absolutely freaks out and bolts. I absolutely heard nothing because of my headset, but got up because she is quite scared. I see my basement door shaking after presumably slamming open into the wall. My heart drops and I think, maybe I left it cracked and the wind pushed it open. I don't see anyone standing in the doorway, but right behind the door there's a huge bush. I got a bad feeling in my gut and bolted upstairs. I burst through the basement door to my main floor, leaving it open, and run outside to my neighbors. My neighbors aren't home, but I hide in their yard while looking at my front door, which is glass and somewhat see-through. I wait for about 45 seconds and start laughing at myself, thinking I'm just crazy. That's when I see a 6-foot man walk up the basement steps and past our front door. He peeks through the glass and I see him wearing a brown shirt and has short black or brown hair. I can't tell much more because the glass is opaque and because I was in my neighbor's yard. I called my parents to get no answer. I then called my sister, who luckily worked at the theater and was there, and she answers. I explain that there's someone in her house and she gets the on-duty cop to send a bunch over. My sister rushes in the theater that my parents are in and they call a nearby neighbor that has guns to go check on me. At the time, they thought I was still in the house. I see the man in my house turn away from the front door and head left down the hall. The left side of the hall has my parents' room and an office room. The office room is what he usually entered, assuming it was the same guy breaking in. After 30 seconds, I see him pass the front door again and go down the right side. That's where my room and my sister's room was. My neighbor is now coming into my yard with a pistol and calling for me, but he doesn't know I'm across the street and I'm too scared to yell to him. Right as he's turning to the front of the yard, he entered through the side. I see the man come back out and go downstairs where he presumably left through the basement door. Poor neighbor probably thought I was kidnapped, so I called him on his cell phone to let him know that I was across the street. No joke, 6 police came, 3 dogs, and they were all armed and ready. They kneeled in front of my garage, and my parents rushed home using the garage door opener to open it for them. Looked like a movie where they all had their guns out and the dogs aiming at the garage in case he was hiding. He was not there, which I knew from seeing him go back downstairs. The dogs start sniffing. They find a scent outside and follow it, but end up just picking up another cop's scent and losing it. They search the entire house and say it's clear, and I go back inside. We sent a neighborhood email out that night, and the next morning we got a response from a neighbor 6 doors down on the edge of the woods. I saw a man sprinting through the woods back into the meth neighborhood. He didn't get a good look at him, but definitely saw him sprinting, so he must have escaped through the back door and then ran back into the woods. The more I thought back on the experience, the more I realized these things. 1. It was probably the same guy since nothing was ever stolen and they were within a year and a half. 2. This man clearly didn't want money because he had tons of expensive things lying around that he didn't take. He searched East Hall for 30 seconds and left. He was looking for something or someone. 3. When I had my back to the woods on the swing, I think he was watching me. When my parents said they were leaving, he must have taken that as an opportunity. He had to have heard me because he came through the least visible door, the one I had gone through. 4. I was in a room that had no exits. If my cat wasn't on me, I wouldn't have heard him and he would have blocked my only exit and done God knows what. 5. I'm lucky he hid for a second before coming in. I'm guessing he wanted to make sure no one else was with me and waited to listen. 6. He was seen running back to the meth neighborhood, so he was probably drugged out and wanted to kill me. He never once took an item and only broke in 3 times when my parents weren't home. I strongly believe that this man wanted to find me, and I think he was watching me from the woods. There's no telling how many days he watched me, because I used to sit on that swing nearly every day. He was probably waiting for the right time for me to be alone. I love my cat to death and fully give her credit for saving my life. If she wasn't so loving, and if she didn't want to be on my lap every waking hour of the day, I would have never known he came in. And I don't even like thinking about what he would have done to me when he had my one exit sealed off. It's still super scary to think about, and I'm not gonna lie, I hated being alone even up until I moved to college. I occasionally hear very distinct boot noises running up my stairs and back down. I would always check the back deck to see if anyone was leaving, but never saw anything. I constantly set the alarm from there on out and hated going on the swing when no one was home after that. Gave me some lasting paranoia too. So to the man who probably wanted to gut me, let's please not meet again. I was around 8 years old. I was playing Super Mario in my room at night, probably around 8 p.m. or so. I had a large window, like 2 normal windows side by side. The blinds were down but were slightly open so you could see the darkness outside. While I was playing, I had a feeling like I saw something out of the corner of my eye. I looked to the left and clearly saw the outline of a white t-shirt in the window. Looked like the size of an adult. I remember being frozen and the hair standing up on my skin. I was petrified. It felt like minutes, but it was only seconds. I dropped my controller and ran out the room, telling my mom immediately. Just as that happened, I remember my dad pulling into the driveway. He said he saw nothing and checked around the whole house and everything, but found nothing. I was so scared though. I tried to even tell myself that it was a reflection of something in the room, but I knew what I saw. I tried to sit in that same spot for a few days to recreate the reflection and what it would look like, but nothing ever caused that look. I knew it. Someone was watching me. This all just happened 15 minutes ago and I'm freaked out, but hopefully I'll do an okay job recapping what just happened. At my apartment building, it's all street parking. Tonight, as I pulled in and parked, I noticed a man walk in the opposite direction from me, but then we made eye contact and he immediately turned around and walked in my direction. At first, I thought it was strange, but then he started to cross the street and was making a beeline for me. He wasn't saying anything at all, so I didn't think he wanted money or directions. It freaked me out, so I frantically grabbed my keys out of my purse and peeled out of there. What freaked me out though was that he was close enough to getting to my car at that point that I made crystal eye contact and he looked pissed. So I drove off and circled around. I did not see that guy anywhere, but decided to circle around again and look super carefully. Once again, looking around the sidewalk and the street, and he's not walking around. I start to get out of my car and I see the guy coming out of the area where there were a bunch of bushes where I guess he had been hiding. Again, he beelines it for me. At this time, I'm actually on the phone with a really good friend of mine who at this point says he'll drive over. Luckily, he lives about 10 minutes from me. Said friend looks around and walks me into my apartment where I am safe now. But seriously, what the hell was that all about? He didn't say anything threatening to me, so I don't think I can call 911. But I do think I'll try the non-emergency number when I calm down. Stay safe out there, folks. So the other night I was watching TV at 4 a.m. because I have stupid sleeping habits. I started hearing someone scream in despair. I opened my windows to take a look out closer, but the person was behind some trees and I couldn't make out what was going on. The screams were loud and painful, sounded like a woman, but I was not sure. The person finally got past the trees and I was able to see two men and one woman. The woman was screaming and the men were there, trying to help or being the reason she was screaming. Being a woman myself, I assumed the worst and called the local police. They are like 20 meters away from where it was happening. I don't know how they didn't hear what was going on. I described the situation and the location, and the police officer said that they were going to go check on it. The woman was still screaming. I couldn't understand what, then collapsed on the floor. The men were behind her, but they went on their way as she kept walking towards the police station. I never saw a police officer come out of the station, but they could have taken a route that I couldn't see from my window. I hope everything was okay with her, and that she just had some bad news delivered and was stressing out, and they were just friends helping. But if that was the case, I don't understand why they went away. The police said that they would call me back if they needed any info, but never did. First post here. It's short but creeped me and my wife out. I stayed up last night, couldn't sleep because I drank coffee way close to bedtime. My wife usually falls asleep way before I do and doesn't wake up to anything. Anyways, I stayed up watching videos and movies and even read a few stories on here. Back and forth to the kitchen getting snacks and drinks. Finally decided to try to go to bed around 2:30 a.m. but was tossing and turning. I decided to take a hot shower as that usually relaxes me. I got up, took a pain pill, recent surgery, and I was kinda hurting. I finally fell asleep around 3:30 a.m. My wife gets up around 7:30 a.m. to use the restroom and yells, "Babe, the front door is open." I stumble out of bed and grab my pistol, heading towards the living room. I look around and see a dim blue light coming in because the sun is beginning to rise and the door is halfway open. I quickly shut it and lock it, go back to my kids' room, and they're both sound asleep. I check the kitchen, bathroom, even our closets. Nothing. I start looking for missing things like keys, console, belongings, and everything is still in place. Nothing is missing. I look at the windows, vehicles still parked. We never use the front door ever. It's always deadbolted and locked, and I don't remember the last time we used it. Where our driveway is the more convenient way to go in through the kitchen back door. We never figured it out. I was back and forth through the living room all night and the door was closed. This is the first time this happened to me in 10 years that we've been here. Never any crime or break-ins around here. It really creeped us out. This happened last year sometime. I'm a small guy and I'm married. We live in a sketchy apartment complex. Anyway, we were sleeping one night and out of nowhere, someone starts pounding on our door at like 2 a.m. We both wake up shocked and a little scared because neither of us really have any close friends or family here. Because we are both kind of antisocial, and the people we do have would call multiple times before showing up. We also at the time didn't have a peephole, and we were the only people with a white door instead of a red door. So when we have new people come over, we tell them that. We didn't answer the door, but I grabbed a kitchen knife just in case. They kept pounding on the door for a good 5 minutes, while also sometimes trying the handle to get in. When they finally stopped and left, we watched them from our window as they got into an SUV. We still have no idea who it was, but I still think about it sometimes. I'm hesitant to share my story, but I feel it's important to warn others about the dangers of being a peeping Tom. You see, I used to be one. It all started out when I was a teenager, and I discovered the thrill of watching people through their windows at night. At first, I didn't think it was harmful. I was just curious about what people did in their private lives. But as time went on, my obsession grew. I found myself spending hours every night peering into strangers' homes, watching them go on about their daily routines. I thought I was being careful. I never got caught and I made sure not to do anything that would harm anyone. But then one night, everything changed. I was watching a woman through her bedroom window when she suddenly turned and caught me. I froze, my heart pounding in my chest. I didn't know what to do, so I just stood there, staring at her in terror. To my surprise, she didn't call the police or scream for help. Instead, she walked over to the window and opened it. I thought she was going to confront me, but instead, she just looked at me with pity in her eyes. She told me what I was doing was wrong and that it could have serious consequences. She also told me she understood why I was doing it, that she had been in a dark place before and done things that she wasn't proud of. That conversation changed my life. I realized what I was doing was not only wrong, but also harmful to myself and others. I stopped being a peeping Tom after that night and never looked back. It's been years since that incident, but I still think about it often. Grateful to that woman for showing me compassion and understanding when I needed it the most. And I hope that my story can serve as a warning to others who might be tempted to engage in similar behaviors. It's never too late to change your ways and make a positive difference in the world.